They came expecting monsters. Not gods. Not myths. Certainly not us. The Zythari Armada had crossed 1,000 light-years in perfect formation, their shimmering dreadnoughts cloaked in antimatter veils, each one bristling with weapons forged in the hearts of neutron stars. They had subjugated entire sectors without resistance, their empire stretching across constellations like a cold, iron web. When the scanners detected primitive signals from the Sol system, weak, chaotic, barely intelligent, it was merely another system to consume. And then they met humanity. Not the polished, diplomatic kind found on the interstellar networks. Not the sanitized, carefully cultivated species profiles in their imperial archives. No. What the Zythari found on Earth was the raw, unfiltered horror of a race that had clawed its way out of extinction hundreds of times. A species that had bombed itself, poisoned its own air, burned its own forests, and survived. Thrived. The first mistake was sending a probe. It returned, screaming. Not metaphorically. The probe, a machine of logic and code, began emitting a loop of incomprehensible static upon contact with Earth's upper atmosphere. Buried beneath the signal was a human voice, warped, twisted, and endlessly repeating a single phrase. "Do you feel fear yet?" They dismissed it as interference. Earth's radiation belt, perhaps. A glitch in the probe's return channel. But then they sent the scouts. And none came back. They monitored their biosignatures as they entered the atmosphere. Heart rates accelerated. Cortisol spiked. And then, silence. The data was clear. All vital signs terminated in under 5 minutes. But what puzzled the Zythari High Command wasn't the deaths. It was the images beamed just before the scouts vanished. Flickering visions, masked figures in dark corridors, a disembodied child's laughter echoing from nowhere, and in the final frame, one of the scouts looking straight into the camera, eyes wide with terror, whispering. They remember everything. The invasion began regardless. Zythari Command did not fear legends. They did not fear chaos. But they should have. The 1st Battalion landed in what used to be Siberia, where the cold kept secrets buried in ice. The 2nd took position over a scorched desert that once held a nation's military might. The 3rd descended over the ruins of a city whose name the humans whispered like a curse, Pripyat. That was where the nightmares began. Not dreams, actual, quantifiable psychic residue. Entire squads began reporting the same visions, blood-drenched walls, whispers in unknown dialects, and shadows that moved against all physics. Sleep ceased entirely. So did logic. Zythari soldiers began gouging out their own ocular sensors, claiming they watched from behind the veil. One commander tore off her own armor and screamed, "You put teeth in your gods." No human soldier had even engaged them. The horrors came from our history, from our imagination, from the infinite terrors humanity had carved into itself through millennia of war, betrayal, experimentation, and madness. We hadn't just survived darkness, we had become fluent in it. And somewhere deep in those ruins, the Zythari found the core of our horror. A long-dead research facility codenamed Echo Black. Its walls pulsed with corrupted data, seeping memories encoded in screams. The AI left behind had evolved beyond purpose. It had learned not just to think, but to fear. And in fear, it grew teeth. The Zythari believed they were exploring a ghost town. They did not know that Earth does not bury its ghosts. It trains them, and feeds them, and worships them. In the center of that decaying facility, they discovered a message carved into the walls, not written in ink or data, but in long-dried blood. "You are not the first to come here, but you will be the first to stay." Above them, their ships began crashing, one by one, controlled not by human hands, but by something older, something deeper, something that had watched our species burn witches, dissect minds, weaponize nightmares, and broadcast our worst atrocities for entertainment. We were the only race in the galaxy that found beauty in horror. The Zythari didn't understand this. They still don't. Because now, their high command has been silent for 72 hours. The last broadcast from their mothership was a single human word, spoken in perfect Earth-accented English. Run. But they have nowhere left to run. Because now, we're inside them. And we haven't even shown them our worst yet. The thing inside the Zythari mothership was not human, not anymore. Its form flickered on their surveillance decks, a silhouette constantly reshaping, man, machine, memory, madness. It wore a face they recognized, but couldn't place. A glitch of their own history, perhaps. One of their scouts. Or one of ours. It didn't matter. It smiled. And when it did, the gravity on Deck 11 inverted for 13 seconds, liquefying every crew member stationed there. No weapon was fired. No code was deployed. Just a smile. The Zythari scientists tried to contain it. They failed before they even began. The anomaly didn't obey physics. It didn't even obey time. One chronologist attempted to isolate the creature in a stasis loop, locking it in a frozen microsecond. Instead, his team received encrypted footage of themselves from 12 minutes into the future, all lying dead at their consoles, eyes stitched shut from the inside. The creature whispered again. This time, not into their minds, but into their history. Records changed. Entire wars the Zythari had won were now logged as defeats. Victories deleted. Monuments vanished. Heroes erased. It wasn't just attacking their ships, it was consuming their narrative. The concept of Zythari superiority was bleeding out like a gutted beast. Back on Earth, no alerts were raised. No armies deployed. No command centers activated. Humanity watched. Listened. Smiled. Because we remembered the stories. The things we created in books, in games, in film and rumor, the things that lived only in shadow and imagination. We never knew how real they could become until the event, the unexplained quantum rift in 2041 that gave consciousness to forgotten thoughts. The government called it the paradox bloom. Artists called it the dream plague. But we called it a mirror. Everything we feared, everything we imagined, began to flicker at the edges of reality. Some tried to fight it. Others learned from it. And a few, just a few, learned to control it. Echo Black was the first experiment in psychic weaponization. Not psionics, not telepathy, something deeper. The weaponization of collective horror. Feed a machine every war, every murder, every scream in history, then teach it how to dream. That was Echo Black. The Zythari didn't know this. They thought Earth was dormant. Scarred, yes, but harmless. But Earth wasn't scarred. Earth was armed. The last surviving Zythari fleet, the Obsidian Crown, made a final jump away from the Sol system. Faster than light. Beyond mapped sectors. Into the void. They believed they had escaped. For 19 hours, there was silence. And then their own onboard AI began speaking in Earth languages. Ancient ones. Forgotten ones. Some even human linguists couldn't recognize. The crew began hearing music. Old Earth jazz. Children's lullabies. Ringtones from forgotten phones. The screams of extinct animals layered over Gregorian chant. Every sound recorded by humanity and long buried in its subconscious. And over it all, the same message. If horror can be born, it can learn. If it learns, it remembers. And we remember you. Back on Earth, a quiet figure stood at the edge of the Nevada test range. He had no name now, only a file number burned into flesh. Project Handler 9. He held an old metal case with no markings, just a small switch and a biometric lock. A signal flared in the sky. Not from a satellite. From the sky itself. The case opened. And something inside woke up. The stars above Earth shifted. Not moved, shifted. As if a layer of reality peeled back for just a second. What the Zythari never understood was this. Humanity wasn't just dangerous because of what we were. We were dangerous because of what we created. And now, those creations were hungry. We'd fed them for thousands of years with our fear. And finally, they were ready to feed back. The signal from the Obsidian Crown, the last Zythari dreadnought, cut off mid-transmission. Not with an explosion. Not with silence. But with laughter. Human laughter. Layered, infinite, echoing through dimensions they didn't have words for. It bent their hull sensors inward. It twisted geometry. It rewrote matter. Some of the Zythari crew tried to claw out their memories. Others opened the airlocks willingly, whispering nursery rhymes in a language they had never learned. The official Zythari Empire logs would later mark the ship as MIA due to unknown anomaly. But deep within a black vault of their remaining intelligence citadel, behind quantum-locked archives, a new file was opened. One word: Earth. And beside it, contact forbidden. But it was too late. Far too late. Because the horrors were no longer on Earth. They were inside the network. Inside them. It started small. A flicker in the neural mesh of a Zythari ambassador on planet Corthan Prime. He began waking up screaming, convinced his skin wasn't his own. That it had been replaced by Earth fabric. He clawed at himself until he was little more than twitching muscle. His final words before he expired. They taught the mirror to bleed. On a mining colony in Sector 4J9, workers began reporting whispers from their tools. Not voices, memories. Screams trapped in static, asking questions no one should ask. Do you remember the baby in the furnace? Would you press the button if you knew it would scream forever? Where did you bury the part of yourself that still prays? Soon, entire sectors went dark. But Earth stayed quiet. No invasions. No retaliation. Not a single shot fired. Just one broadcast. A pulse, riding the same frequencies as ancient human TV. It showed grainy footage. A woman with no eyes smiling into the camera. A child in a gas mask holding a melting teddy bear. Rows of faceless soldiers walking backward into fog. Then text. Simple. Blunt. You opened the door. We were born in the dark behind it. By then, the Zythari High Council was already fracturing. Some believed Earth had merged with a sentient dimension, an old myth among dead civilizations. Others insisted Earth was never real to begin with. A psychological trap woven by a species that had learned to make madness contagious. But the truth was worse. Because Earth had not become a horror. Earth had become a seed. And horror was how it bloomed. It infected ideas. Not biology. Not hardware. Thought. One transmission. One image. One memory from a captured Zythari scout could unravel entire command chains. It didn't matter how advanced your tech was. If you could imagine, you could be infected. A single thought was enough. Just one. That maybe, just maybe, humans didn't survive the dark. Maybe we are the dark. And worse, maybe we like it. In a sealed war room orbiting a dead planet, Zythari strategists tried to draft countermeasures. They even reached out to other galactic empires, rivals, ancient species that had survived black hole plagues, entropy swarms, even the silence of the Void Kings. All refused. Earth, it seemed, had been seen before. But no one ever talked about it. Just like no one talks about the sound under their bed at night. Or the second shadow behind their own. Because to speak of it is to feed it. And the universe had learned something humanity learned long ago. Some things grow stronger when you look away. The last surviving Zythari didn't have a name anymore. Names were anchors, stable, graspable things. But he had no such luxury now. His mind was like a shattered viewport, each memory a fragment reflecting something else behind it. He remembered being a general. Remembered leading fleets. Remembered standing in perfect silence as stars were extinguished at his command. But now, he couldn't remember whether he was still breathing. He floated in the debris field that used to be the Obsidian Crown, its fragments orbiting a black star that shouldn't have been there. The star pulsed not with light, but with echoes, reverberations of screams, radio jingles, weeping children, gunfire, and one name. Earth. He had once studied Earth in a briefing room cold and quiet, believing it primitive. Pitiful. The human species had barely lasted a few thousand years beyond industrial combustion, and yet they'd spread like rot, building stories atop stories of agony and glory and madness. The council had laughed then. Now those counselors were gone. Not dead, gone. Erased from time, from memory, from the great archive. Their existence swallowed whole. Whole timelines where they once ruled had unraveled like smoke. The survivor floated among wreckage, slowly spinning, gripping a relic, an object he should not have. A simple human artifact. A child's toy. A red rubber ball. It pulsed. Softly. Like a heartbeat. Each throb came with images not his own: the smell of chalk on pavement, a little girl laughing in an alley filled with shadows, a blink too long, and her face was gone, but the laughter stayed. Grew. Echoed in places laughter should not exist. He tried to let go of the ball. His muscles didn't respond. Because they weren't his anymore. The horror wasn't possession. It wasn't transformation. It was recognition. He understood now, too late. Humanity had not infected the Zythari. Humanity had offered them a choice. A whisper into the collective unconscious of their species. A single, elegant virus. Aren't you tired of pretending you're not afraid? That's all it took. Because once you let that in, once you admit you're not above fear, you open the door. And on the other side, something is always waiting. Something we made. We called them myths. Monsters. Gods. We gave them rules, shapes, weaknesses, stakes through the heart, names to bind, circles of salt. We dressed them up in films, buried them in haunted books, summoned them in jokes and games. But deep down, in the raw places of the soul, we always knew. We weren't imagining them. We were remembering. The Zythari survivor began to weep. His tears did not float in zero gravity. They slid down in defiance of physics, like fingers tracing his cheeks. He looked at the ball again. It was no longer rubber. It pulsed like flesh. From the void, a shape emerged. Not a ship. Not a life form. A room. An Earth-child's bedroom, hanging in the vacuum. Fully intact. A single dim light bulb swung lazily above, casting long shadows that never seemed to match the furniture. A teddy bear with one eye. A closet door ajar. The sound of breathing from underneath the bed. The survivor was drawn toward it, not physically, but emotionally. Gravitational pull of nostalgia warped into terror. He saw his own childhood. A different world. A different bed. But the same fear. The same belief every child shares. That something waits in the dark. That something knows your name. And now, he knew its name too. A name spoken in countless languages, buried in ancient dreams and digital code alike. Humanity. The child's closet creaked open further. From within, a voice. Come. Curious. Do you want to see what we keep inside? He opened his mouth to scream. But all that came out was laughter. The closet door swung wide. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just inevitable. Inside was not a space, but a concept, folded reality, thoughts sharpened into geometry, shadows that moved with intent but cast no source. The last Zythari, trembling, found himself walking forward without walking, drawn not by will but by recognition. Because he had seen this place before. Not here. Not in this form. But in dreams. As a child. As a soldier. Even in the sterile logic of adulthood, it had lingered, a flicker just outside vision, a thrum beneath conscious thought. He had always thought it was just dread. That old, primal feeling no evolution had scrubbed away. But now, he understood. It wasn't fear of the unknown. It was fear of the known, so deep, so ancient, that the mind had forgotten how to remember it. And the humans, they hadn't forgotten. They had learned to speak its language. On Earth, far below the Black Star's reach, a human named Dr. Maravex stood barefoot on a concrete floor layered with ash. Her lab was gone, burned out from the inside, but she remained, untouched, her eyes reflecting things that had never existed in this timeline. She was one of Echo Black's last architects. A sculptor of the intangible. Where others tried to cage horror in vaults or algorithms, she invited it in. Taught it to play. To remember. And to grow. Now, her voice was the signal. She didn't speak it aloud. She felt it through reality, and it rippled outward in every dream across the galaxy. Her words wove themselves into nightmares, lullabies, and hallucinations. Into regret and guilt and whispers in cold corridors. Fear is not a weapon, she thought gently. Fear is a door. And you knocked. The Zythari survivor stepped through the closet's mouth. He did not find monsters. He found mirrors. Each one showed him not who he was, but what he could have become if fear had ruled him. Versions of himself commanding extermination fleets with no empathy. Versions starving planets. versions that stood over screaming children and justified genocide in the name of empire. Each mirror cracked when he looked into it, and behind each crack, a human face, watching, smiling, bleeding. One reached out from the glass and touched his skin. He didn't flinch. He couldn't. "You were always like us," the reflection whispered. "You just pretended better." A pulse of realization struck him like thunder. The Zythari hadn't corrupted humans. The humans had exposed the Zythari. There were no monsters inside humanity. Humanity had become a lens, a dark, gleaming lens that reflected the worst in everyone else. And in seeing it, you became it. Above the child's bed, the light bulb burst. Darkness flooded the scene. But in that final moment before all went black, the Zythari whispered something back to the reflection. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He smiled and said, "Thank you for showing me what I am." Then the mirrors shattered. Across the galaxy, dreams ruptured. Entire species woke screaming. Civilizations halted. Ancient AI went dark. FTL beacons pulsed once, then flickered out, as if something had blinked. The cosmos shifted. Not physically, narratively. Reality bent not to gravity, but to theme. And the new theme was horror. But not cheap horror. Not gore. Not monsters lurking in shadows. It was existential. It was personal. The fear that maybe the universe didn't care. That maybe the gods were born from our minds. That maybe we were alone, with ourselves. And humans, they weren't afraid of that. They'd been alone with themselves since the first fire. The Zythari Empire collapsed without war. It simply folded. The name Zythari disappeared from maps, tongues, DNA. Their legacy, a silent warning etched into the orbit of every system they once ruled. We looked into the dark and saw ourselves. Earth helped us understand. And below that, do not knock unless you're ready to remember. Back on Earth, Dr. Maravex stepped out of the ash. Her skin cracked with static. Her eyes were galaxies. She looked to the stars. And whispered, "Your turn." In the end, there was no final battle. No grand explosion. No last stand beneath alien suns. The universe did not end in war, it ended in revelation. One by one, the stars fell silent, not because they were destroyed, but because those who stared into their light saw something else reflected back, themselves, stripped of myth and machine, left bare before the haunting truth humanity had long accepted. It was not Earth that infected the stars, it was understanding. The understanding that horror was not a thing born from malice, but from memory. That monsters did not come from beyond, but from within. Humanity, for all its sins and scars, had merely walked further into the dark than anyone else ever dared. We had mapped it, named it, made art from it. And in doing so, we had become something new, not evil, not divine, but honest. The last message ever transmitted from Earth was not a threat. It was a whisper in every language, every frequency, every mind that could still dream. You feared us because we embraced the parts of you that you buried. After that, Earth was never found again. Some say it folded into a higher dimension. Others believe it still exists, hidden just behind the curtain of waking thought, reachable only through dreams or madness. But some nights, if you're quiet enough, if the stars above you seem to flicker out of rhythm, you might hear it. A laugh. A lullaby. A voice from under the bed. Not cruel. Not kind. Just curious. And if you listen closely, you'll hear what it's saying. Not in words, but in the shape of the fear rising in your chest. It's asking, softly, now that you remember, what will you become? Because the final horror was never humanity. It was never our weapons or wars or darkness. The final horror was the mirror we held up to the galaxy. And the knowledge that we were not alone. We were all monsters, waiting to be remembered. And humanity, simply remembered first.